right. Well, here we are, man.
I know.
We met on Instagram, which is where a lot of people have met you.
I know.
And I was like, this is a giant long shot. You were talking about the new nonprofit that you started, Liftra, and I sent a message on there, or a comment on there, and was like, "Hey, what are the odds? Would I should have you come on the podcast or something?" And you messaged me, and you were like something like, "Let's do it," or it was very very short, and I was like, "Is he? He's being serious?" And then we exchanged phone numbers, and we had an amazing conversation. I started reading your book, which we'll get a lot of the way into with this, but yeah, your story is unique in so many ways, from where you grew up. So let's kind of start there. Let's start with your history as a kid. People that have maybe read the book, you'll maybe get a different insight of hearing you explain some of that. So tell me about what year you were born in, and then what was happening inside of Ghana, Africa at the time when you were born, with the political landscape, with your family. We'll just start with the political landscape, and then we'll get into your family.
All right. So I was born in 1984. 1983 was actually a famine in Ghana. So there was a crop failure, I believe, and a lot of people were hungry. And so I was born right after, close to the cessation of the famine. So things were kind of rebounding. My parents had 2 kids at the time. So I have an older sister and an older brother. And so I was born, I would say, I don't know, we don't have a concept of middle class necessarily. But I would say my parents, my dad was college educated with a degree in chemical engineering. And my mom was, at the time, she hadn't graduated college, but she was just like an entrepreneur. So she was always doing whatever she could to support my dad. And they were a family of 4. I came in and became a family of 5 in 1984.
And there was also some military coups or some takeovers that were happening, and the guy leading it had already led another one previous to this. So tell a little bit about that.
So basically, at the time I was born, the head of state, we were under a military dictatorship. So the head of state at the time was Jerry John Rawlins, and we called him JJ Rawlins. So for short, most of us called JJ. And so JJ Rawlins was president. JJ Rawlins was a pilot, and a really, really good pilot. He flew fighter jets. He also was responsible at the time for flying the president. And so his title at the time was, I don't remember all the military titles, but there is a story, a legend, that he took the president in a plane, and there is a bridge in Ghana, and this bridge over water.
You didn't tell this in the book. Oh my goodness.
That he flew the president under the bridge, between the water and the bottom of the bridge.
So he took the Ghana equivalent Air Force One. He's the pilot of this, and he flies it underneath of a bridge to what? Scare the mess out of the president?
Idea.
Or
so I have never tried to validate this story, but this is something we grew up with, because he was an extremely good pilot. But the idea was that because he did that, he put the president's life in danger, that he was demoted and he became flight lieutenant. So now we all knew him as Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlins. Wow. And Rawlins was basically, I would say, now that I've studied him a little more, I would say in terms of his mindset, his philosophy and everything, he was basically a wannabe Che Guevara or wannabe Castro.
Okay.
That's the kind of mindset I would put him in.
Okay.
So he was railing against the rich. He was railing against corruption of the rich. He was railing against the fact that people were suffering, and the corruption and the mismanagement of the economy had made it impossible for people to, get out of poverty. So he said all the nice things. He said everything, and he gained.
I'm here for the little guy.
Exactly. I'm here for the little guy, and he gained a lot of political capital doing that. And then he was actually, he attempted a coup, which was found out and failed. So he actually was not successful.
Right.
And he was arrested and charged with treason. So he was in prison, And while he was in prison, he was actually sentenced to death for treason. While he was in prison, he was able to commandeer somehow some of these prisoners and other people in the military who attacked the prison, freed him from
Sounds
the
like
prison.
a movie. Yeah.
Exactly. This would
Yeah.
be a really
Yeah.
great movie.
It really would be.
But they freed him from the prison. And while he was in prison, he was tortured. There's stories about his fingernails being plucked off and things like that. So he suffered in prison. And then he was broken out of prison. And once he did that, he took a bunch of people, a bunch of military people, and they went to one of the national broadcasters and commandeered a radio station. And they announced that he had taken over the country. And that's how he performed. So that would be technically a second coup. So the first one was unsuccessful.
Right.
He was in prison, and then he did the second coup when he got out of prison. And then he became the head of state. And while he was head of state, he only was head of state for a little bit because his idea was, no, this is not my role.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm here to ensure that power is returned to the people, and we're going to have elections. So that's exactly how it started, right?
Does that actually end up
Exactly.
happening?
So he actually was quite noble. People saw him as quite noble because he was like, I am just a transitionary person to transition, and we're going to have elections. And so elections were organized in 6 months. So that's how he ruled the first time. And then a new president was elected. And then
after that 6-month period.
Exactly. There was a new election, a new president was elected. And then he came back. So this was 1979. And then he came back in 1981 and said this new president was not basically reforming the country fast enough, and he overthrew that. And so there was a third coup where he overthrew that government.
Jeez.
And then he became head of state in 1981. So December 31st, 1981.
And was he imprisoning or killing political adversaries, or what was happening with that in that time?
So when he came into power initially, one of the first things he did was he put what he called the corrupt leaders, he put them on trial, pretty quick trials, and many of them were condemned to death. So 3 former presidents who were also people who had come in through various coups and different things like that, they were executed. And then there was I don't know how you would say this, but basically something happened where people woke up and 3 Supreme Court justices had been executed, plus the superintendent of police had been executed, and they were executed by firing squad, and their bodies had been burned. Of course, the president, head of state at the time, said he had nothing to do with it, and we're going to find the people who did this, and we're going to, execute the justice, and so on. But that's the political climate that I was born in, I guess.
And when you're a baby or a young kid, you're still getting the residuals of that. Like the stress that would be inside of your parents, or the stress that would be that you grow up in. It does do something to a kid, I'm sure. Even if you're not able to understand it or process it or any of those kinds of things. And then you were saying in your book that your parents were kind of isolated. Maybe that's not the right word, but it's like some of this felt distant to them. Is that maybe a good way of saying it? Or
I think at the end of the day, I mean, Rawlins was a dictator.
Yeah.
However, he didn't go after the ordinary folks.
Okay.
Right? So he went after like taking control of the media and people who would be potential opponents to him.
And you said that there was one channel growing up?
Exactly.
And it was
national media controlled.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid, we had opportunities to go to, we called it the GBC. So think BBC, GBC, Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. And when you would go to the GBC, there were snipers in the trees. Like, that's how controlled it was. Like, there were armored
So you
cars.
went on like a class field trip.
I know. And we did some
to the government controlled
media.
Exactly. With snipers in the trees.
Snipers in the trees. You would see all the armored vehicles and literally snipers in the trees. because he knew that he came into power by commandeering
Mm.
a radio station,
Right.
and he knew that we have to protect the main source of information so that nobody can use
Mm.
it as a way to transmit
It's funny how
propaganda.
well, I was going to jump to current times with some of that, but we'll get there because censoring of speech or controlling media, there's something about that that never ever seems to play out well in human history. But before we get there, so you're growing up. Your dad's a chemist, college educated. What was you said that there wasn't like a real sense of a middle class there, but you guys did very well in those times or in that. Reading your book, it seems like there was times where you guys in America would not be considered prosperous, but there in that environment, you seem to be doing better than some of the people that you knew.
I would say my dad was never a chemist. So even though he graduated with a
Okay.
chemical engineering degree, he worked for the Ministry of Industries for a little bit,
That's right. I remember.
and
Okay.
and then he moved kind of out of the engineering world completely and moved into he went first to Social Security Bank, which was one of the major banks over there, and then eventually became a government employee
Mhm.
and worked for the customs service. So um, I would say we were relatively privileged
Right.
in terms of, now my parents started with nothing,
Yeah.
but because my dad had a college degree, he had prospects that were much higher than other people.
Right.
And so when I look at my life, I would say I probably, by American standards, you would probably call me an upper middle class kind of
Okay.
kid. And so um, I'll say this. This was a funny thing. When I was in America, I remember once someone asked me, how was it like growing up in Ghana, right? And I was telling them, the different things, and then some other white kid from Idaho just blurted out, I was like, how was it like growing up poor?
Just
And
immediately thinking that that's the way that
exactly,
it
and
is.
I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
I wish I knew.
Right.
I
Right.
wouldn't
Right.
say
Right.
my parents were rich, but we were okay.
You're well
Um,
off around comparatively to the standard around
yeah,
you. But like you didn't
comparatively.
have running water in your house when you were a
Um,
kid
s-
for a part of that time,
and
right?
it's not so much for the lack of that infrastructure. It is just that one of the challenges we have in Africa, and this is kind of a general thing, is what I say is a lack of standard operating procedures for
Mm.
different things. So in America, if you were making a development, you would say, okay, I need water access, I
Right.
need
Sewer.
electricity,
Oh,
I
yeah.
need sewer, I need all these things, and they need to be there when I build these homes. But so you would have a brand new development with
Right.
beautiful homes, but no water, most people have a manhole
Right.
in the back or something like that. So things like that. So it wasn't that we didn't have water because, it was you couldn't afford it or that kind of thing. It was just that the development had not made any provisions for
Okay.
water.
The
And
infrastructure
so
wasn't there.
exactly, the infrastructure had not been laid. And
Okay.
so we would, when they started finally putting that infrastructure in place, we would have water like once a week. And because it was not constant, we never piped it into the homes.
Gotcha.
So we had large tanks outside and we would fetch the water outside and bring it into the home. So that kind of thing. It wasn't for the fact that, people couldn't afford it. And depending on where you lived, you could have water every day and
Yeah.
have it in your home. But so growing up, I actually grew up for the first 8 years of my life. I lived in a place where, it was more developed. And so the water came into the house. But then we moved to this new development that didn't have any water at the time. So those were some of the challenges you have to deal with.
Right. Um, you had 7 dogs as a kid.
Yep.
Tell me about that terribly traumatic day for you as a young boy. My wife trains dogs,
Mhm.
and our house is filled
Yep.
with dogs. We're huge dog lovers, and when I read that part of the story, I was like, oh man, like, because I remember losing my dog when I was a kid, and it's something that's so hard. But tell us about what happened. So it began at nighttime.
So it was actually during the day. So we had an exterminator
Mhm.
who had been hired to come in and spray the home. At the time, they used DDT as their agent.
Okay.
And so they would go around and kind of spray all the different places. Just think about, when the spring comes, usually you would spray, all the various entrances that you would expect bugs
Right.
and other critters to come into your home. And so they were commissioned to spray the entire house. And so they did. Everything was good. That day, we also had sheep and goat in our backyard. And so that day, one of the sheep had died. And
Dogs.
so we decided that we would feed the dogs with the meat. And so we had cooked some of that meat, and the dogs were just going to have a heyday. So the dogs normally would have their bowls and these were outside dogs. So they would have their bowls and the places they eat. But this was a special treat. And so all 7 dogs kind of took their piece and, found their hiding spot or a place where they could eat. This is our kind of speculation as to what happened. That the dogs dragged these pieces of meat all over the place after it had been sprayed. And so we woke up the next morning, not knowing anything. Woke up in the morning on Saturday, and the dogs were kind of behaving funny.
And how old are you at the time?
I was 6 turning 7 or just about 7. And so the dogs were behaving funny, and they were running around. So our parents asked us to stay in the house and not come out because we didn't know if they were rabid. We didn't know what was going on.
Right.
And they were just like running around, and we just watched them in distress. Couldn't do much about it. And eventually, everything calmed down, and we came out and started looking for them. And on that morning, 5 of our 7 dogs had died. And that was a traumatic event for me as a kid.
Yeah, I'm sure for your siblings as well.
Yeah, it really stuck with me. Fortunately for me, because we had so many dogs, every child had a dog that they were responsible for.
And
my dog was Peace, which was very, like, the name of that dog did not match my personality at all. So
what was your mom's dog's
my
name?
mom's dog was Rebel.
Rebel, and that was more fitting.
Yeah,
but
that was-
name was already taken. Yeah.
That was the name that would have been more suitable to my temperament at the time. And so Peace and Scott were the 2 dogs that survived the ordeal, because Scott was very timid. Peace was not, a fighter. So they didn't eat as much. They were poisoned a little bit, but they didn't eat as much. And so we were able to give them some antidotes, and they were fine. And so I remember we dug a huge pit in the backyard and buried 5 dogs in one day. And it was just,
as a 6,
really
7-year-old kid.
Yeah.
That's such a, and what's interesting, right, is that, there's some kid living in a house up there, and if he loses his dog, especially in that way, it's, terrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the way from someone to growing up in Ghana, it's like certain things about the human existence are hard no matter where you're at.
Exactly.
You could grow up in the most privileged of places, or in a place in a third world country or whatever, and some of these things humans can't escape.
Yep.
So you grow up, and you guys had a decent amount of animals, right? You were responsible for ducks.
Ducks,
Yeah.
exactly. So we had animals. So apparently, I learned this later on when I was writing the book, to say, hey, Dad, why did we have all these farm animals in a residential area, which is kind of interesting. But he said they had listened to a speech by one of their religious leaders who talked about self-reliance. And they were like, okay, we gotta, be self-reliant. And so they started with a few chickens here, and then we got some ducks, and then a couple of sheep and goats, and they started breeding. And eventually we had a lot of sheep and goat and ducks and chickens and guinea fowl and all sorts of animals in the backyard. So as kids, we had the opportunity to care for these animals. My responsibility was the duck pond. So I was responsible to wake up and, get the, stale water out, and then fill it with fresh water. And then, the ducks would go on their merry way.
How healthy do you think that was for you to have that kind of responsibility as a younger kid?
It was kind of expected. It was part of our lives. We all had chores. We all worked at home. My brothers were responsible for the sheep and goat, getting them out of the pens,
Hmm.
putting them in, an area, a fenced area that we kept them during the day, and then cleaning out their pens and and washing it out, all sorts of things. Everybody had a role to play. Everybody had a responsibility. And that was important to our upbringing because we
Yeah.
were all part of something bigger. We're all working towards a bigger goal, and we supported our parents.
I think if you don't have that ingrained as in you as a younger kid, it's very hard to learn that when you're older.
Hmm.
And I think that's something that we're really missing in America. One of the many things is that responsibility for young kids,
Hmm.
and especially caring for something. It's different than
Exactly.
make sure you
You clean
this is
your
how
room,
you turn your
right?
socks in and fold them and then you put. It's different caring for something that needs you for its survival at such a young age. I think it ingrains something different. I was fortunate enough to work um, on a farm for 2 years when I was, I think, 11 and 12. And I was older at that point, but that gave me such a different understanding of, like, I thought I knew what it was like to work hard. And then I
Hmm.
got around people who really worked hard, or I thought I knew what it was like to take care of a dog. But then all of a sudden I'm taking care of cows and I'm planting seeds and I'm doing all these kinds
Hmm.
of things. And I think it's a kids need that type of response. Kids need more
Hmm.
responsibility than they currently have anyway, but I think we especially need to give our kids the kind of responsibility of caring for something that needs you, because I think that it rewires the brain when you're young, I think in a really healthy way. Tell me about your mom. I fell in love with your mom just reading your book. So, and you talk about how much she influenced you.
Hmm.
But tell me a little bit about your mom.
So my mom, I would say, she was a special person. She was like filled with this unquenchable faith.
Mm.
She always believed that things will work out. So my mom had the opportunity to actually come to the U.S. as a teenager, and she lived in upstate New York for a year and a half, I believe. And while she was there, she attended high school, her senior year of high school. So she had a little bit of an American experience. And so when she came back to Ghana, married my dad, and raised us, we had a little bit of American influence
Yeah.
in our home. So she would make, apple pie. She would make, shepherd's pie. She would make other things that were quintessential American.
You said your siblings and you guys didn't know how to. You didn't like it. Some of the American
Um,
food.
yeah, the idea that meat could
Right.
be sweet, or the idea that you would put milk in your soup, like,
It was
all
so
those things were
foreign.
just
Yeah, yeah,
weird
yeah.
and foreign to us. But yeah, she brought us up always knowing that we could do anything. And so one of the things that she did was she felt she wanted to start a school. She had a calling. She had this kind of inner deep seated desire
And what was her
to
level
start
of
a school.
education at when she decided to start a school? Had she had already, because earlier she didn't have any college. At this point, had some college education
So
or
she
no?
had started
Okay,
a pre-med program.
that's right.
And
Okay.
so she had started a pre-med, and her thought was that she was going to be a doctor. But then she came home from the US and then decided to get married. But once she got married, that opportunity kind of fizzled out.
Right.
So she never continued her college ambitions, but she was still very interested in working with kids. And so she remembers as she was raising us, she would go to the daycare center that she
Mhm.
was taking my older brother and my sister, and she would just stand there and watch the kids. As she would drop them off, she would not leave. She would just stand there and watch the kids. And one of the days, the owner of the place was like, "You look like you're really interested in kids." And she's
Right.
like, "Yeah, I would love to do something like this." And so she started kind of mentoring her, giving her opportunity to understand, how to run a school, all these different things. And in around 1989, my dad had the opportunity to come to the US. So when my dad was gone for 3 months, my mom saw that as an opportunity
She
to
started.
start
She started buying.
putting stuff together to start a school.
Yeah.
And my dad would send some money, and she was taking part of that money and buying school supplies. And she hid the supplies under her bed.
So, and so she's watching kids play. She has this desire. Fast forward, where does that end up? Like at the peak of that, what was the peak of her educating others?
Seriously, at the peak of everything she did, she actually created a university. So she went from 11 kids in a little town and built that up to educating thousands of kids all the way to the university level. So she actually started a university and also started a nursing school. So she did all that, educated thousands of kids. And one of the main things that she also did was she wanted to help the unfortunate kids. So in one of the villages, about 3 hours outside of the capital of Ghana, she established a charity school that also helped, thousands of kids. And that school still exists today. So I would say in her tenure, and as many of you know, she passed away from breast cancer.
Yeah, I'm sorry
But
to hear that.
in her tenure, she probably, educated 10,000 or more kids over that period.
What a legacy.
And yeah, she touched many, many lives.
Yeah, you think of the offshoot residual effects of if you teach 10,000 kids, well, what is that? Like, what does that
Ripple
do for a
effect,
region?
exactly.
What does that do for a
Exactly.
country when you're able to give kids like that education? And it seems like, too, she seems like a very intentional woman on top of it. And it wasn't just her, here's your ABCs, here's your one, two,
Exactly.
threes. It was more than that.
They had a slogan at the school which
Yeah.
resonates with me. When they would do like advertising and things like that, they would say, "We train leaders, others train the rest."
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Exactly. And they believed education was the key to economic opportunity. If you gave a child the opportunity to be educated, you had given them something that nobody else could take away. No dictator, no government could take away the education that you put in the mind of a child. And you free them from all the encumbrances that beset people who are stuck in a cycle of poverty.
Yeah.
Education is that key that gives people, the way I put it is, the worst thing you can do to a person is to hide from them their potential. And the goal of education is to bring children face to face with their potential. And when you do that, you put in them a fire that can never be extinguished, because now they understand this is what I can be. And once you teach a kid that you can be something, right, you give them that taste, immediately you set them on a path of discovery that can change not only their lives, but generations down the line. So that's her belief. And she didn't only do it for other people's kids, she did it for us as well. So
Right.
I was educated in my mom's school. All my siblings were, many of my cousins
You ended
were
up
all
teaching there at one
educated
point
in my
as
mom's
well.
school.
Yeah.
And then when I graduated from high school, she hired me. My first job was as a teacher. And so many people ask, how are you so eloquent? How are you able to, articulate your thoughts in a very cogent way? I was a teacher at 16. I graduated high school at 16. So I was a teacher and started teaching. I started with computer skills. So teaching computer skills to kids from K to ninth grade. And then I was elevated to a homeroom teacher, but also teaching English. So I started teaching English to kids from 6th to ninth grade. And I learned to stand in front of people. I learned to,
Communicate,
articulate properly. I learned to be able to
lead.
convey
Yeah.
ideas with, analogies and things like that. So all that, gave me the
Starts for you at
foundation.
such a young age. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and one of your students ended up doing something here in the States. Tell about that. What happened with that?
All right. So one of my students, his name was Ezekiel Ansah. And that name may not be familiar to some people who may be listening to this, but you will know once I tell you who he is. But basically, he was, when I was 6th grade homeroom teacher, he was one of my students, and he was one of the brightest students in the class. And so I remember when I left in 2023 to come to America for the first time, At the time, he was at the end of his junior high career. So when I came back to Ghana, that was in 2005, I think he had either barely graduated high school or about to graduate high school. And he wanted to go on to the next thing. My parents hired him as a teaching assistant in the school. So he hung out with my parents and was a teacher in the school because he was really smart and waiting to go to college. At that point, he said, "Hey, I want to play." He was really good at basketball and he was really tall. So he was about 6'6". He was really tall, loved basketball. He played basketball in high school. So everybody thought, he's going to play basketball professionally somewhere, but the opportunity did not exist. However, there was an opportunity where, because of my parents' school and their connection with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they actually had Steve Young in Ghana, visiting Ghana. And while they were there, they said, "Hey, this kid wants to play basketball in America." And so they put in him this idea that he could come to BYU and play basketball. So I remember picking up what everybody now knows as Ziggy Ansah. I picked him up at the airport. I was at BYU at the time. I picked him up at the airport, brought him, he stayed with me for a few months. And I took him to his first basketball tryout. He was not, picked. He was struggling with the altitude and everything. Long story short, he was not picked for the basketball team, but he was also really fast. So they put him on, he started trying out for track. So he's on the track and he's at this point, 6'6" and, probably 200 pounds. And as he's running on the track, one of the coaches of the football team sees him and is like, "Who is this giant on the track?"
Sport.
Like, what is going on? And so they reached out to the coach, the track coach, and said, "Who is this kid?" And, they reached out to him. He knew nothing about football, but they brought him in and he started kind of playing. They started teaching him. People had to show him how to put his pads on. And eventually he was on the special team. So he didn't get to play like real big stuff
but still,
until he got to his senior season when the starter defensive end was injured and he got to start. And that was a breakout season for him. So he just went crazy. And if you want to go see Ziggy Ansah highlights, he was just crazy on the BYU team. And
how crazy is that for you that you were his 6th grade homeroom teacher, and then all of a sudden you're now watching him?
I know,
as a starting defensive end for BYU.
For BYU. Amazing.
And it wasn't like his story of how he got there, the connections, but then, no, we're going to do basketball. We're going to do track. Why is that guy doing track? He's going to come play football and then play special teams and then go to finally get the defensive end position.
For me, it is a testament to potential and a testament to the right connections and being in the right place at the right time. And God, I would say God having a purpose for a person's life. And so nobody could have sat down and planned and orchestrated any of this. Right? Nobody could have done that. But, he was associated with us. He was my good friend. I was his teacher. And all the way through those associations, all the way to, starting defensive end at BYU.
Speaking of movies, that needs to be a movie.
It absolutely does. Yeah. But he didn't even end there. So after that great season, final season, he's, of course, on the draft watch lists and everything. I had the opportunity to go to the NFL draft with him.
Oh my goodness.
And so I was in the audience when he was drafted number 5 overall for the Detroit Lions in 2012. So this was amazing. I mean, it was a culmination. No, I just played a very, very small role. I was not the one on the field, putting in all the work.
But anybody that has a story like his is connected to someone with a story like yours, you know what I mean? And somebody giving those opportunities and setting it up to where someone can end up doing something like that it takes so many people. And like you said, it takes, only God can write a story like that.
Seriously, seriously, yeah. And so that's a really, really cool story.
So now let's rewind just a little bit. So you grow up with this hunger for the American dream, and some of it starts with a picture of your dad. And what was your dad doing in that
All
picture
right, so
that created this magical understanding of what
of
America
America.
was? Yeah.
So this, remember I said my dad went to America in 1989, and this is when my mom was, hiding or buying school supplies and hiding it under bed. So my dad was in Los Angeles, and while he was in Los Angeles, he had the opportunity to visit Disneyland and also SeaWorld, Universal Studios, and then he actually, got a trip to Vegas. So he had a good experience while he was in America. But one of the things he did when he came back, he brought us pictures of all the places he had been. And as a little kid, one of the pictures that really was iconic to me was a picture of my dad with his hand, towards a dolphin. And it really stuck in my head that this could not happen where I was. Mm. Now, I don't know that there are dolphins swimming around the coast in Ghana. Maybe not. But the picture just planted in my head that there were certain things, certain experiences that I just could not have. Not because I didn't have the ambition, not because I didn't have the desire to have those experiences. It was just by virtue of where I was born, I would not have those experiences.
Do you remember was there a sense of defeatedness as you realized that? Or was there a sense of, I'm going to find a way to I'm going to give myself those opportunities at some point? What was the sense that you got? Was this like, oh, I'll never have that? Or was it like, I'm going to find a way?
The way that I looked at it is, it was something that I could strive for, right? So I was never defeated. I knew that at some point I would make it. I just didn't know exactly how it would happen, but I knew that it was going to happen. And my goal was to put myself in a position to make it happen. And so throughout my life, from that age, looking up, my dad would say, you would go to BYU, you guys would go to BYU. And so it was in my mind that I would go to BYU at some point. Now, I didn't know how it was going to work out. And I remember when I was about to turn 16, I was like, okay, how do I get to BYU? How do I make it happen? And I was like, okay, I have to take the SAT. So out of the blue, I come to my dad. I'm like, I want to register. I'm not a good test taker. So I was like, I'm going to register for the SAT. I'm going to take the SAT. And my goal was, I'm going to do whatever I could to put myself in a position to go to BYU. And so throughout my childhood, throughout my teenage years, this was something that was my goal. And I did take the SAT. I came out, I didn't do too well. I think it was out of 1,600, I got like a 10-10. And so I'm like, okay, that doesn't look too good. But, and when I graduated high school, as I told you, I was 16. I couldn't go to college immediately. I had to wait. And I had the opportunity actually then to go to a private university in Ghana for a year. And that's actually what gave me the bridge to then transfer. So I came to BYU as a transfer student instead of as a freshman.
And talk about briefly the hazing that you experienced in high school, what that was like going through that.
Yeah.
What did it teach you?
Interesting. So in Ghana at the time, I think they frowned on it enough that maybe it's not such a thing anymore. But there was something, we didn't call it hazing, we called it ponding. Ponding, because there's a pond and you get dunked in a pond. Okay. So the whole process was called ponding. But ponding was basically something you did to people on their birthdays. And so the worst you could do to somebody was to reveal their birthday in school. and
so, your loving mother.
I know. My mom brought me a birthday cake.
Go like this really quick. Got it.
So my mom brought me a birthday cake. And that birthday cake, of course, had my age on it, 16, no. And also had everybody knowing the day of my birthday, which I had guarded for the first 2 years of my time in high school. Now, high school for most people in Ghana is boarding school. So I went to boarding school for 3 years. So this is my final year, and I thought I had escaped. Nobody was going to bother me. It was the end of the day. We're ready to turn in for the evening, only for me to come to my dorm and have people literally drag me out of the dorm and take me outside, take off my clothing, take me over to the pond, dunked me in the pond, and then anytime I tried to come out, they had belts whipping me all over the
Good
place.
grief.
They took me from there. They took uh, lotion from my room, poured it all over my head, and then a bunch of dirt and put it. So you had a mixture of lotion and dirt
Oh,
in my hair, and I was just beaten. Um, and then I am like sitting there like this with my head down, and one of my roommates, who is like my best friend, we grew up together, and we're both in this high school together in boarding school in the same dorm. And I feel like a warm, tingling feeling on my side. And I turn around, and it is this high school, my childhood friend, who's like peeing on me. And that was like the culmination of the ponding event. But it was legendary to the point where it got the authorities in the school got wind of what had happened, and because I called home, I had to, I don't know if I was sick or anything about, but anyway, something
probably.
happened, and my parents got wind of it, so they called the school, and then the school did an investigation. They made me tattletale because they were like, if you didn't tell, then you would be in trouble. So I had
Right,
to
right.
point out the people.
Right.
All of them got,
You're like, Mom and Dad, stay out of this.
so people got suspensions.
Yeah, when you start urinating on people, I think you
Yeah,
cross.
some people got
It goes
suspended
from hazing to something else at that point.
for a
So,
few days, and it was legendary. But in terms of lessons learned or anything like that, I mean, this was just, I would say, teenage. Um, I don't know. I'll just say it was just an event that
right,
happened,
right.
and I didn't think much of it after it was over. You know, I didn't have any lingering
Right.
anything about it. It was just something that happened, and
At one point, you talk about in the book, and maybe this is where I need to connect it. So you talk about how one of your superiors, I think another student, but a higher student, thinks he sees you out in town on the
oh
weekend.
yeah.
You didn't have a pass,
Hmm.
and that did something to you. To tell about that story and what you ended up taking away from that.
Exactly. So this experience was very interesting to me. So I would say an obedient student. There were students who would, break curfew and go into town. So there was a famous club called Jets Club, and so some of the students in the night they would leave campus and go to the club, and they would come back and regale us of their tales. And I never did any such thing. I was relatively obedient to school rules and policies, and I never, went out of the school without permission. So you needed explicit permission from your housemaster, and once your housemaster gave you permission, then you could leave campus.
Mhm.
So I would always do that. And so I was at dining, and the assistant head prefect at the time saw me and called me up to the stage. And then he said, "Didn't I tell you to come see me?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" It's like, "Didn't I see you in town?" And I'm like, "No, you didn't see me in town." And he asked me to go and kneel down in the middle of what we called the Sahara. So the dining hall was the largest dining hall in West Africa. So it seats like 2,000 kids. And in the middle of the dining hall is a space that we call the Sahara Desert.
The hot seat.
Exactly. And so when you would misbehave or they would catch people doing, things, then they would ask you to go kneel down or sit in the Sahara. So everybody's watching you. And one of the promises I had made to myself was I would never do anything that would get me to sit in the Sahara. That was my thing. And this person, through a false accusation, was asking me to do the thing that I never wanted to do. And so I defied him in front of the whole school. I said, no, I am not going to the Sahara. It's not me. And I remember my house prefect like looked at me, winked at me, and was like,
Go, go, go.
go, just do it. We'll figure it out later. Just do it. And I'm like, no, I didn't do anything wrong. I never went out of the school. I never broke curfew. I never did anything like that. And so eventually I defied him and I walked away, took my seat. And later on, after that event, of course, in some way I became a little bit legendary. But he called me back and he punished me for disobeying him because, I mean, this was the head prefect. He punished me for disobeying him. And in that private setting, I did obey him. So I took the punishment. But then I told him, I am not the person you're looking for. And I could never agree with you that I did something that I didn't do. And for me, that the lesson there was standing up for yourself sometimes might lead you to certain kinds of trouble, but you cannot compromise the truth. You cannot compromise the truth. And even if you're standing before, thousands of people, you have to be firm in your beliefs. You have to be firm in your convictions. And the most important part of that process is knowing what you believe. If you know what you believe, then it is much easier to stand up for what you believe. And I was just, at the time, only 15 years old. And for me, it told me that I can stand up to authority. I can speak up in the face of injustice. So it was a small lesson, but it stuck with me, and I've kind of lived my life that way.
Yeah, very much so. Your dog should have been named Rebel. But at the same time, you were a rebellious younger kid, you talk about in your book, but then you said, I wasn't going to be a rebellious student. I wasn't going to do the things that I knew I shouldn't have done. And then you learned how to rebel in the right ways. And I think all teenagers have this desire to rebel. And something about that, I think, is healthy. I think it's the thing that ends up making us leave our father and mother and all these kinds of things. But having the values and the convictions to harness that in a good direction is rare. And for you to have that rebellious spirit about you, but for you to not rebel in the bad ways, but for you to rebel in the right moments as a 15-year-old in any place in the world is very unique.
Exactly.
And I feel like that always comes somehow back to parenting in some way, shape, or form. For a kid to be able to, at 15 years old, be like, no, like, I'm going to walk the straight and narrow. But at times, there is a time to be rebellious. There is an appropriate time to respond with, I will not just fall in line for the sake of falling in line.
Exactly. But then, like I said, sometimes it comes with consequences. Like sometimes you will be arrested, sometimes you will be, but at the end of the day, if you believe that, justice eventually wins, then, as long as you are rooted in eternal principles, that is the most important thing.
Because you might not get justice in this
Exactly.
life. Yeah.
As long as you're rooted in eternal principles, then all things, as Romans 8:28, all things work together for the good
of those
to them that love God. That is an
according to
important
His purpose.
perspective to have. But you have to be rooted in truth.
You talked about that scripture in your book, and that's one of my favorites as well, because I've seen so many terrible things happen in my life or in my friends' lives or whatever, and I've seen how God can turn that for good for those that love Him and are called according to His purpose. So, man, yeah, I see that. You know what I mean? When I hear about your story and I meet who you are today, I see that as probably one of those moments that if you didn't have it, you wouldn't be the same person that you are today without having those kind of milestone markers where you learn defiance in the right way.
Exactly.
And it's such a hard thing to teach a kid, to have that type of confidence, that type of independence, and those types of convictions. But also then knowing that there is consequences to that. It's like, like you said, you might go to, most of our greatest heroes in history experienced injustice. They knew there was consequences that would follow. And they knew that was a part of it. And they knew they might not get justice in this life. Do you think there's a difference between fairness and justice? And if there is, what is the difference?
Yeah. Fairness and justice there is definitely I would say there's a difference between fairness and justice. I believe, for me personally, I believe the ultimate justice will never be achieved in this life.
Mm.
And that's what makes a difference. I know people think, I can get some revenge and that would be justice or something to that effect. I feel that justice is something that we can get close to, but we can never attain in this world. True justice has to consider every possible facet of the situation. And unfortunately, as human beings, we're limited in our scope of understanding. We're limited in our the breadth of our perspective. And because of that, we can't make things perfectly just. That is the responsibility and prerogative of God. And He has promised that if we leave things in His hand, He will be the ultimate judge. And so fairness, I think, is a standard that we hope to achieve in this life. That is the thing that we have to strive for, to treat people with respect, to give them opportunities. And I think fairness is not just about how you treat people per se, but it's also about things that you don't do, right? Things that you don't do. So I would say I am capitalist. I understand that, I can strive for what I want, and it is possible to obtain the things that I want. Sometimes it will be difficult, but it is possible. However, at the same time also, just because I have a bigger hand and I can grab more candy doesn't necessarily mean that I should do that in certain instances. So, for instance, I saw this video that has been shared all over the internet that I think illustrates that idea, right? You come to, you're trick-or-treating on Halloween and you come across a bowl. You have two options. You have candy in your bag from all the other homes you've already gone to, and you realize that the bowl that you're trying to get this more candy from is empty. What do you do? Well, you could say, well, they have a bowl out and the goal is to distribute the candy. It's only two left in here. I can take that candy and add it to mine, and I would have done nothing wrong. Perfectly fair. I took my piece. Or you can look at it and say, what about the people who are coming behind me, right? And having the discernment to be able to see afar off and say, actually, I have enough. And actually, I want to take this, or I want to give an opportunity to somebody else, right? That is important. I think it takes a higher level of discernment to get to that point. And I think that's when you are actually approaching what I believe true fairness is, right? Fairness is not just taking the thing that, rightfully belongs to you, but recognizing that as a creature, your existence is not just to fulfill your needs, but your existence is also to improve the scope of your influence through your actions, right? And so that's the kind of philosophy I live with. And I think justice will come with heaven, and that's fine. That's not in my hand. God is the ultimate judge. But as much as possible, I can try to be fair to the people that I interact with.
Yeah, I think fairness and justice often get confused. I think one of the ways we see that is equality of outcome versus equality of opportunity. And, we think fair right now, especially in a socialist worldview or something like that, equality of outcome. Everyone should have the same outcome. But to me, and I think to you, that's not justice. Justice is equality of opportunity. And that should be something, in every zip code in America, we should be trying to get the opportunity to the same level. That should be the goal. But the outcome of that, we're doing people a disservice if we give them all the same outcome of the opportunities that they're given.
The way I would put it is this. Even as a society, no matter how much we try, we will never be able to equalize opportunities because people are free agents. And because they're free agents, they will destroy opportunity for themselves, right? And so every child will never be able to grow up in the same opportunity landscape because of the choices of either their parents or the choices of the location and so on and so forth, right? So me growing up in Ghana, someone in America would say, well, you had limited opportunity. But then I, growing up in Ghana, looks at the person growing up in a little village in Ghana, and I would say, wow, I had so much opportunity compared to that person in that little village. And so opportunities will never be the same, no matter how hard we try, because human beings are individual agents unto themselves, and they will make choices that will make opportunities unequal. What I think is important, and why I do not agree with the idea of equality of outcome, is very simple, right? If you give a piece of bread to someone who is already full, that person will see that piece of bread very differently than someone who is hungry. Okay? Same outcome, you're giving a piece of bread. That's fair. But the person who is full might throw it away because I'm full. How many times have you eaten your fill and you don't even want to see the leftovers? Like, I'm just done.
Right.
I don't want to smell it, right? But then there's somebody out there who just, will die just to have that smell. So the way I'm looking at it is this: you cannot engineer equality of outcome without being unfair. Like, you can't do that, right? Any system that attempts to engineer an equality of outcome necessarily will have to be unjust and unfair in order to achieve that.
That's a beautiful way of saying it, and that's a very counter narrative to what's being preached
People
right now.
think that, if I give a popsicle to you and I give you a popsicle, that you would be both equally happy. That is a lie. That is a myth. Because if I am on my way to church and I have my Sunday best on and you give me a popsicle, it may be a nuisance to me. Because now, what am I going to do with this?
Right.
It's going to melt. It's going to make my, mess with my dress. Like, I don't want this. Versus someone who absolutely needs it. So if you attempt to engineer equality of outcome, what you are doing is attempting to control people's desires, control people's ambition, control people's choices, and basically telling them you will get what I give you and you have to like it. Unfortunately, that's not how the world works.
Yeah.
Because giving someone $1 million in a 10-bedroom house may make them the most depressed person.
And we see that all the time.
Exactly.
We see people that win the lottery or whatever.
Exactly.
And it destroys them.
Exactly. And so I feel what society has to cultivate is people recognizing, one, their potential, and then living up to that potential. Because once you hit that potential, that is when you really receive fulfillment. And that potential for you might be, a 2-bedroom house with, a beautiful wife and 2 kids and living your dream with your little garden in the back. That is your choice. That is your potential. And that brings you happiness. That is great. I don't want some overlord coming in and saying, oh, because that person over there has a bigger mansion, I think you should aspire to do that. And I am going to engineer a society to give you what that person has. Or I'm going to take from that person and impose it upon you. And suddenly, I'm like, I enjoyed my 2-bedroom.
Right.
Now you've given me an acre of land and I hate mowing. That's why I had my 2-bedroom house.
Right.
You can't engineer an equality of outcome without being unfair and unjust to individuals.
Pinhole cameras.
Pinhole cameras. So this is kind of the basis of my true patriotism when it comes to America. And the reason I say this is, when I share the story, it'll make sense to you. But one of the things that I struggled with as a kid was not that I lacked food or basic necessities. Like I said, my family would have been considered affluent by Ghana standards. And so I had everything I needed. I didn't have a want for food. And But the thing that kept me wanting more, and when I say more, it's not more food or more material things, is that I felt like my vision of what I could accomplish had been limited by the circumstances of my birth. And what I mean by that is, imagine waking up wanting to build a castle and then looking around you and saying, where do I begin? Where are the tools? The tools don't exist. They have not been made yet. The plans don't exist. So there's no plan that I can follow. The materials are not there. So suddenly you're like, I have this castle in my mind, but I don't have the tools necessary to make it happen. And that's the struggle that I had as a kid. And that was really illustrated in a time when I saw a physics book that had an experiment in it, how to make your own pinhole camera. So I was like, I'm gonna make a pinhole camera. I don't know anybody in Ghana up till this day that has ever thought I'm gonna build a pinhole camera. But I decided to do it. The first thing on the list of things was get a shoebox. Where am I gonna get a shoebox? We grew up with secondhand shoes, and you would go to the market and you would bend down. We called it the bend down boutique, because you'd go down and they would have everything sprawling on the ground, and you would bend down and pick the stuff that you like and things like that. And so where am I getting a shoebox to make this pinhole camera? So something as simple as that, right, becomes an obstacle. So I had to fashion a box out of, random things.
Which growing up in America,
exactly,
a shoebox, we use those as little storage bins, and
exactly.
They're everywhere. They're all over the place. But for you, just that, what would seem so silly and so basic here in America is like a shoebox. What? So
exactly.
Okay, so you build this box.
I find a box somehow. I got a couple of my classmates in high school to come together. We were on vacation at the time, and so we came together and said, we're going to build this. Long story short, another item that I needed was a film for this pinhole camera. So you needed one of those films, if you remember. But this was a very special film. It was not the normal film that you would put in your point and shoot cameras. And so I had to go find the film. I searched all over the place. I went into the city by myself looking for this film. After a couple of days, I find the film. I find some film that was close enough. I couldn't get exactly what I needed, but I found something that I thought would be close enough. And so I brought it back, and we spent half a day building our pinhole camera, and we did build it. We took some pictures, and we were very proud of ourselves. But then it came to the point of developing the pictures, and for some reason, I couldn't find a way to develop the pictures. And that really just stuck in my mind, because I said, in spite of all the effort, in spite of all the desire, in spite of all the motivation, it was just impossible for me to reach, achieve certain things just because I'm here and not somewhere else. And that really bothered me.
That same feeling, was it similar to looking at the picture of your dad with the dolphin, or was it different?
The way I looked at it, I think it connects in some way. So my dad with the dolphin thing is, there are experiences I could never have while here. And then there are dreams I could never achieve if I am here. Now and when I say this, my mom, as I said, changed many lives, and she did it all in Ghana.
Right.
So I am not suggesting that you can't build a life of purpose and accomplish great things in Ghana or anywhere else. And many people have done that, and that's great. For me individually, I had this uneasiness. I felt like the way my brain worked, like I wanted to be free. I felt like I was in some kind of mental slavery, meaning that I had things I wanted to do, but I couldn't even begin to think about them, because the first thing that you would ask yourself is, where do I get the first ingredient? And you're stuck.
Yeah.
Right.
So that puts this kind of burning desire in you again to, I want to have those opportunities.
Exactly. And it's not that I would accomplish everything I ever try, but
Right.
it's that I don't want to be limited.
I,
And so
I don't want to be told no because the resources aren't available.
exactly. And
Yeah.
it's not even that somebody will tell you no. It is more like
Yeah.
you recognize that this is not
Your
going to work.
environment has created the
And
no.
I did not want to be in the mindset where I begin to train myself not to jump as high just because I knew that there was a ceiling that I would hit if I tried. And I wanted to be free, mentally free, to be able to daydream and think of the grandest things and have it be possible, even if I chose not to pursue it, that it would still be possible, right? And so the way I describe America in a lot of ways is I say, America is the place where I can wake up in the morning, I can dream that I want to build something, go to Home Depot, get it, get ingredients, get materials, and by sundown, have a prototype. Today, I am able to wake up and say, I have this idea. And to the chagrin of my wife, I'm always building something new. And I come in, I'm like, imagine if,
And she's like,
you know,
oh no, here we go.
imagine if there was this platform that does this and that and that. And she's like, are you going to build it? I'm like, I started yesterday. But the freedom of being able to dream about
Absolutely.
something and immediately have all the resources, not just the physical resources, but the mental, the intellectual resources that I can go to any college and find a professor who can has some experience, who can talk to me about it. I can get on YouTube. I can, all that is part of the American dream for me. I think a lot of people are thinking, when they think about the American dream, they think, well, you come here, you work hard, you make something of yourself. And that's all great. But for me, the American dream is not necessarily what you achieve, but the ability to be actually free mentally. That is the American dream, because you can wake up and say, I want to go off grid. And that's going to be my American dream, right? I want to go off grid. I want to build something in the, a shack and live freely. That could be your dream. Or you could say, I want to be Elon Musk. I want to build something beautiful. I want to build a company. I want to change lives and have that be possible. Like, that is something that, no amount of government program can engineer that. And so the American dream is not a social program.
Right.
It is not, benefits, welfare benefits. It is not that. It is the ability to dream freely and be able to wake up in the morning and say, I will pursue this dream with focus, with ambition, with motivation, and nobody can stand in my way except my own self. Right? That's
it, folks. We could cut that right. We won't, but I mean, just that right there. Something that really, bothers me to no end right now. Not sometimes I get annoyed by it, but I think it breaks my heart more than it annoys me. Is the young people in this country that don't understand that, and they don't understand the way the world is outside of, me and my two older daughters and my wife, we were watching a movie. I can't remember. I think it was The Patriot or something at one point, and I pause it, and I don't want them growing up with this total misunderstanding of the opportunities that they have to be an American. And I think earlier that day, I'd seen somebody that I know them personally, and they're in law enforcement. And they were talking about how they had to pull a dead baby out of a river in Texas. And how the narcos throw the babies into the water, and it creates this huge thing, and then they're able to smuggle drugs up in a different part of the river because border patrol will be dealing with that situation, and how mothers will jump in after their babies and they'll drown and die. And I said, if you guys don't understand the opportunity that you have, and that people will die for the chance that you are so privileged, and you're not privileged because of your skin color, I'm talking about the privilege of being an American and that you get to grow up in this place where you were born into it. And there's people, and I've told them so much about you already before we've even met, that you guys have no idea how hard people have fought just to be able to have the rights that you have by birth. And I used to work with teenagers for close to a decade, and I would listen to them talk, and I don't know, thousands and thousands of hours now listening to teenagers share their views and their understanding of the world and stuff. And and then now I'm watching tons of college kids explain their views, understanding of the world, and it is they have a very small understanding of as we all did in some capacity as a teenager. But I think one of my biggest motivations for this conversation is that I hope it gets into the hands of some college kids and some teenagers that are American. They were just born here, and I want them to get how beautiful it is that they get to do what you're describing. And you do not want to squander that opportunity. And what you definitely don't want to do is exchange that opportunity for something that is evil. You do not want to give up the American dream and the economic system of capitalism, and you don't want to trade that for socialism. It sounds good on paper. It's never been proven to fully work. And I debate people online every single day that are screaming at me, I'm sure on the other end of their phone, telling me I'm this idiot because I don't understand that socialism is all these kind of things. And I'm like trying to talk to them, and I'm like, it's frustrating.
It is for me as well.
More for you. It's got to be more frustrating for you than it is for me.
It is for me in this sense. Like you said, many people make sacrifices to be here. You talk about family separation. That's something that a lot of people use to sensationalize mass deportation and things like that. But they don't realize the millions of people who voluntarily left their families in order to come here. Right? Think about that. I barely have a relationship with my nieces and nephews because we are separated thousands of miles apart, right? My kids barely have relationships with their cousins because we're separated thousands of miles apart. And so the sacrifice that you make to bring your family here, to raise your family here, a lot of times involves separation from family. And we understand that, and we endure it because we believe that we're pursuing something greater. Now, when I think about socialism, I think this is the way that my dad, he didn't describe socialism per se, but he taught us a principle where he said, it was about compromise. And you hear people today who would say, hey, I'm not left or I'm not right. I'm just kind of in the middle of, we need to compromise and everything. And the lesson I learned from my dad was this. He said, if I gave you the best meal that could ever be cooked, your favorite meal, right? And it is perfectly prepared. And just as you were ready to take your first bite, I tell you that, hey, just to let you know, there is a teaspoon of dog poop in this. Would you eat it?
Wow.
Like, would you eat it? No, you would say, no. That teaspoon of dog poop ruins everything. It doesn't matter if it smells good. It doesn't matter if it, looks good. It doesn't matter. The fact that there's a teaspoon of dog poop.
And you don't know where it is.
Exactly. The fact that I know now that there's a teaspoon of dog poop in this thing, I cannot embrace it, and I cannot compromise otherwise. I cannot say, well, it's only a teaspoon of dog poop and it has all sorts of meat and other things and beautiful, flavors and spices and everything. You're like, no, I don't care about the spices. I don't care about anything because I cannot compromise with dog poop, period. And that is a lesson that I have applied to the idea of socialism, which is that it doesn't matter if it smells good, looks good, tastes good, or maybe tastes good, I don't know. But
maybe you've had a small bite
the
and that was good.
problem is not necessarily what it presents itself as. The way you judge any philosophy is by two ways: judging its impact on the people, that judging its impact on the people, and then number two, whether it is congruent with freedom, right? So if I'm looking at an ideology, the first thing I ask a socialist before we talk about any economics, I say, what do you do if I refuse to comply? And if you cannot answer that question with you are free to comply and or not comply and there will be no consequences, if that is not the answer, then that's a non-starter, right? That's a non-starter. Before we talk about
the dog poop.
Exactly. That's a non-starter, because anything that denies the fundamental right of human beings to be free, to make their own choices, that thing is not congruent with human flourishing, with human potential, and with human excellence. And so that is a non-starter. Capitalism is not perfect, and we have not really practiced a true, pure free market because government has its tentacles in all sorts of markets. So I understand that capitalism is not perfect. However, capitalism in general is congruent with freedom, because I can choose where I put my economic value. I can choose if I want to participate in the market or not participate in the market. I can choose to come together with a bunch of random people, move to a convent, or move to a random town in the middle of nowhere, buy some land, and live in a commune. Capitalism would allow that. Socialism denies the fundamental premise of human existence, which is freedom to choose your destiny. And if you can't guarantee that, then your economic ideology is a non-starter in a free country. That is the bottom line. And I think that is the thing. I think what conservatives erroneously do is get into the semantics and the economic policy. Oh, is more people gonna have food, or less people gonna have food, or is more people gonna, we're talking about things that don't matter. Because if I told you right now, even if I told you, hey, Micah, guess what? I am going to put into this room anything you would ever want to eat, right? You have a bathroom, you have a TV, you can get whatever entertainment, you have internet, and you can get anything you want. The only limitation is you can never leave this room. Would you consider that paradise?
Of course not.
Exactly. So it is not about whether socialism is able to give you an extra loaf of bread, or it's not about that.
It's a beautiful analogy.
It's not about that.
You're confined now
Because
to this.
Exactly. It doesn't matter if socialism gave you everything, because it will not satisfy the human desire to be free. And that makes
beautiful, Alma.
That makes it antithetical to human flourishing. And that is why we need to reject it.
Why? I think the argument of the counter argument, I'm going to take the socialist maybe standpoint, is that, well, in the past, yes, there's been that dog poop, but we figured out where it's at now.
And we can take it out.
But I think you've already countered that argument by saying, well, what do I do? What do you do if I say I'm not going to be a part of it? That's where the real crap's at.
Exactly.
Is in that moment right there.
That's when the face of socialism, which is the other side of the coin,
right,
is government authoritarianism.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you allow one person to say no, standing up for yourself, freedom is contagious. Freedom is contagious. And so as soon as one person says, I will not participate, and you don't stop them from escaping from the system,
yeah,
that will be contagious, and the system collapses under.
And I think this is something, and I've yet to express this out loud really with anybody. So I guess that's called a hot take, maybe. I think your worldview is the filter with which you see everything else at that point. And I think something really dangerous about the evolutionary worldview versus a deity worldview is that, oh, like human nature changes or we evolve beyond some certain point. You know, the reason why socialism didn't work in these other situations is because we weren't evolved enough yet. You ever looked at the cover of Darwin's first book?
No.
And I'll post it on here if we put this on social media. But it says, I'm trying to remember the first part, but it says, blah, 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 and then favored races. Now, he doesn't talk about, and to give him some, to make sure I'm explaining this correctly, races were also like different different types of birds, different, and then later in his book, it's the something of man is the name of it. He does talk about how there is favored human races, and I think, you know, Christianity often gets socially, you know, they're the ones that created racism and they're the ones that, you know, see that, but really it's the other worldview. And there's this evolutionary worldview now, I think, takes people that are very wealthy and very rich, and they think they have a moral obligation because they've evolved beyond these lower beings, that it's my moral obligation to make decisions for them because they don't know how to make decisions. You know, I'm more evolved. I know how to do this now, and they don't. The very different, especially with Christianity, is that it is the most equal look of the landscape of humanity. It says that we've all fallen short. And we cannot evolve ourselves out of our human brokenness. And that left to our own devices, we will always do X, Y, and Z that is evil. And the founding fathers, they understand this fully. There's a great article called The Five Spheres of Government. It's taken from the principles of the book of Deuteronomy. And it talks about how, that's another time, but essentially they understand that the human default is to do these things and we cannot evolve out of this. So we need to create a government that understands the fallenness of the man, the accountability that'll have to be in place, the checks and balances, and they set this up and it changes the human landscape of everything that we know when they found this country. Changes everything. And the farther we get away from that understanding of human nature and the brokenness that we have as humans, the more we think we've evolved out of that, the farther we get towards some of these really terrible things. And I think socialism is one of those.
And I will bring it back to another scripture in the New Testament. The wages of sin is death, right? And any of these systems, where do they always end up? You have to eliminate the dissenters. You have to eliminate the dissenters. And the only way you can do that is through re-education in camps or actual permanent elimination. And that is why, this is another hot take, I would say, but that is why it is impossible to believe in God and embrace either socialism or communism. And that is why one of the first things that socialist or communist dictators do is to eliminate God. Because if you don't eliminate God, then the life of the individual is divine, it is special, it is God, it has a piece of God in them because we're created in the image of God.
Yeah.
Exactly. And because of that, it becomes very difficult to eliminate the people you have to eliminate in order to attain the society you are trying to engineer, right? And so you need God out of the picture in order to eliminate the parts of that society that refuse to comply. That is why you need God out of the picture. Because if there is a God, then we are all created in his image. And if we are created in his image, then we have value that transcends any government, transcends any system, transcends everything. Meaning, if I pick you up in the middle of the jungle today and you were naked and had nothing, you would still retain certain rights that cannot be taken from you. And the only way you can engineer that out of the human being is to disconnect them from their creator. Because once you're disconnected from your creator, then I can create a new origin for you. And that origin is that you are a tool for a system. And if that tool does not work, we throw away the tool. And that is the system of communism. It is, we think the human being is an engineering material. And if that material does not behave in the characteristics that we have defined for that material, it is good for nothing and can be trodden under the foot of man. Okay, and I'm going to say this. This is a story that I heard. I'll be really brief about it, but it really illustrated to me.
Yeah.
So in the Old Testament, you hear about the Tower of Babel, right? Where people were building up to heaven. And a lot of times we look at this as the arrogance of man, right? People who think they can, through their own engineering, get back to God. But I heard this for the first time from Glenn Beck, and he said that he had heard it from a rabbi. And, for me personally, it resonated with me when I heard it. And what he said was this: it was not the fact that people were trying to build up to heaven that was upsetting to God. He said, the Tower of Babel, as far as we know, was the first time that the idea of a brick was introduced. They made bricks. Now, what is the difference between a brick and a stone, right? A brick is a certain shape, has four corners, and how do you determine one brick from another? You can't really tell them apart. They're uniform, they conform, and they fit, in a certain way, right? But what is a stone? A stone is different. So before bricks, people built with stone. Now stones have different shapes, different sizes, different material, and so on and so forth. And as a builder who is building with stone, you can't throw away any individual stone because you don't know if you would need them in some small hole that only that stone can fit. So every stone is equally valuable to you. But in a brick mindset, I can just replace one brick with another, and losing 1,000 bricks makes no difference because I can just make another 1,000 bricks that look exactly the same way. So the claim was that the reason God was upset is that man was attempting to create a new paradigm where the value of the individual soul did not matter. What mattered was what that soul was going to be built with. And for those people, human creators, they thought, we just need everything to conform to this. And God said, no, I didn't build a world of conformity. I built a world of diversity. And that diversity works together. If we look at our ecosystems, if we look at all the interplay of all these living things and the nature and these cycles and all these things, these are unique and different things that all come together. And that is the essence of God. And so...
And you fast forward to the New Testament and you look at the body of Christ.
Exactly.
The hand can't say to the foot, I don't need you.
Exactly.
And it creates this beautiful picture of everything has a use and a purpose in God's kingdom.
Exactly. And ideologies like communism and socialism deny that because their goal is to make you a widget. So that you can just be slotted in when you're needed, and when you are no longer useful, you can just be discarded, right?
I think Christianity is the most equitable take or worldview that you can have for humanity. And I think, you look at the Civil War that was fought inside of America. It's so sad that even had to happen in the first place. But you look at the people that decided that they were going to fight that war for the right reasons, And if you look at their beliefs, I challenge anybody that thinks Christianity is evil, to go look at the beliefs of the men and the women, but the men that said, we are going to take on this fight to abolish slavery. Christianity was at the bedrock of what they believed. And they said this, even you go all the way back to Thomas Jefferson. All men are created equal. While having slaves, he had a woman that he had 6 kids with who was one of his slaves. But then you look at his letter to, was it Cain? I'm trying to remember his letter to Cain. And he says this slavery is such a terrible mark on our country. And yeah, man, like, I think people would hear us saying this and think that we're Christian nationalists or whatever, like whatever this new term is that they're now. We were talking about some of that over dinner, the terminologies that get adopted and however the conformity that happens with that. But the reason why I want Christianity to still be the bedrock of this country is because I want equity for everyone. And I don't think you can get that with other worldviews.
It is very true. And it is, once again, any ideology, judge it with its congruence with freedom. And Christianity, I believe, lays a foundation for freedom. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't find periods in history where people have abused their authority, whether church leaders have abused their authority, and so on. You can find that everywhere, in every system.
And that doesn't mean you get to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly.
Because just, if a kid puts on a Michael Jordan jersey and can't hit a layup from 5 feet away, or for, right there, you don't blame Michael Jordan.
You don't question Michael Jordan's abilities just because the person playing Michael Jordan does not live up to that standard. And that's something we need to, and unfortunately, that is the in that the devil, and that is the in that godless ideologies uses to get into the minds of the youth, is to say, hey, look at that Christian over there, person claiming to be Christian over there, and look at these imperfect things that I can associate with that person. Therefore, make the gigantic leap that Christianity is the problem. And I see that every now and then when people talk about, some of the challenges out there, and then you see people saying things like, well, there's also Christian extremism. And I'm like, okay, let's assume that there is. Okay, and I'm sure there are pockets out there in the world where there might be some extremists who call themselves Christian. But let's assume that there is. The question is not whether there will be bad people. The question is how the collective treats the bad people. And that is what you should understand. So if you're judging a group of people, you would say, okay, yes, we're all fallible people. And therefore, there will be people who are unable to live up to the tenets of their own beliefs. However, how do we treat the people who are bad people? Do we embrace them? Do we lionize them? Do we put them on pedestal? Do we condemn the fact that the things they did were bad?
You look at, I think the KKK tries to say that they're a Christian.
Exactly. What power do they have?
If I, and this is going to sound very virtue signaling of me right now, so maybe I shouldn't say it, but I'll say this. Most people that really believe in who Jesus said he was and what he did, if they're standing there and a group of white men are getting ready to do something to a black person, they are not going to stand by. And those could be considered the Christian extremists. And Christian men would hold the boot to the neck of other men that say they're Christians, and they're going to dehumanize and kill people because of their skin color.
Exactly.
We will not let that happen. So that's what happens when Christians see extremists as a part. Now, what do Muslims do? If they see extremist groups, I don't hear them saying, we do not agree with this. This is not who we are. This does not represent the tenets of our faith in the way that happens in Christianity. And there is some very peaceful, I know some Muslims that are incredible people and that want peace and that want, we could go into a whole rabbit trail of that and we might get ourselves in trouble.
Even without talking about any specific religion, this is what I would say, right? when someone wins power, that is when you truly know what they're made of. Okay. So one of the questions you should ask yourself when you're evaluating different religions, evaluating different ideologies, different people, ask yourself the question, what happens if this person had ultimate power? What would they do with that power? So this is what I find.
I think I know where you're going with this.
This is what I find, especially in politics. Okay, in politics, you find that many times, when, and this I would say, I'll give you a case in point. If you remember, in the 2024 election, Mark Cuban was supporting Kamala Harris. Okay, and Mark Cuban is a smart guy, I would say. He has built businesses, he has supported businesses, he understands how the economy works. He understands incentive structures. He understands risk taking. He understands all this, and that's why he's a successful businessman. When he was asked about Kamala Harris and her economic ideas and plans and so on and so forth, he said something, I don't know if a lot of people recognize it, but for me, it solidified a belief that I have, which is that he said, she's not going to do this. She's not going to do that. And so the way that you know whether an ideology is a positive ideology is when they all make their pitches. I believe, anyway, that for the most part, when it comes to the ideologies of the left, people hope that they wouldn't actually do the things that they claim they want to do. So, for instance, Zoran Mamdani is now going to be the mayor of New York. And you know what people are thinking? They're hoping that he doesn't freeze the rent. They're hoping that he doesn't do the, free grocery stores. They're hoping, so even those who supported him, if you go and ask them each individual thing, they'll say, I don't think he will be able to do it. And they're hoping that Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, will stop him from raising taxes. They're hoping that the city council will not pass some of his changes. So even though they have supported the person, they're hoping that his ideologies fail. They supported him for his charisma, but deep in their hearts, they're hoping that he actually doesn't implement the things that he wants to implement. On the other hand, when I am upset with a Republican, it is not because I'm hoping that he doesn't do what he said he would do. It's because I'm hoping he does what he said he would do. That tells you the difference. So if I see a Christian, I would say, I hope he lives as a Christian.
Yeah.
I hope he lives as a Christian. But there are other religions where I'm like, I hope he doesn't follow everything that this religion says.
And you
because
look at...
that would be detrimental, not only to society as a whole, but it would be detrimental to my life and the lives of my children. So that is one way you can tell the difference is even when they win, who are the people that you hope would actually accomplish the things they promised, and who are the people you hope would not accomplish? That would tell you, give you that moral dichotomy between the two systems.
It's beautiful. Yeah, and immediately my mind goes to Jesus being tempted with power, and him understanding, one, where real power comes from. And then you look at some other figures in religious ideologies or their prophet and what happens when that one is given power and what he does with it. The Mecca versus Medina, times in history. So and man, I think we could go on for like 5 hours. When you come to America, let's lighten the mood a little bit. When you come to America, you land in Los Angeles and you experience something when you get off the airplane. And it's a terrible thing. What is it? Do you know what I'm implying right now?
The weather.
That story made me laugh so hard, especially when you give the temperature. I'm like, man, was it going through like this cold spout or whatever? So tell about that experience of getting off the plane in Los Angeles. You're filled with hope, you're excited, and then all of a sudden you experience what temperature?
I walk out of LAX and I felt a sensation I'd never felt before. I have been cold in my life, but I had never felt cold on my legs. Like it was nothing that we wear sweaters, right? And we cover our top part. But I'd never thought about putting anything like covering your legs as
Right.
a part of staying warm. Like that had never crossed my mind until I walked out into Los Angeles. I'm like, I feel like I'm not wearing any pants. I am cold on my legs. It was just a very
What
interesting
temperature was
experience. It was 65 degrees.
it? And now look where there's snow on some of these
I
mountaintops.
know. It was 65 degrees. I had to go back after I was acclimated to America. I had to go back to find out what the temperature was on that day.
Oh man.
And I'm like,
Did
65 degrees.
You're like, what was I
I
thinking?
was so cold. And seriously, I was praying every day. I'm like,
Yeah.
please God, help me deal with the cold.
Yeah.
Help me deal with the cold. And I look back now, I'm like, that, okay.
Was
Yeah.
not the hardest thing you're going to endure.
I know. I know.
Was
Now,
the temperature,
this is a
especially
funny
65
thing.
degrees.
I think about my son yesterday, and he wakes up and he checks the temperature every morning to know what to wear to school. And he's like, oh, it's going to be 50. I guess it's warm today. I'm
And
like,
you're like, what?
yeah.
Oh
So-
man. So in your book, you describe, the journey of coming here on a visa, the different visas that you end up having to have between you and your wife, who you later marry, the catch of the area, and she ends up coming here with you to America. You guys build a life, and all the different things that how the visas limited you in some ways, how they provided you opportunities, but then how they were limiting because you were on a student visa or you were working for this company at a time, and all these different things that happen leading up to you finally end up getting a green card. And then it puts you on this path of knowing, wait a minute, like I could become a US citizen. What happens from, describe that last part of that journey of you get your green card and now you're on the path of becoming a US citizen, and the testing, the studying for it. Let's talk about that story. You and your wife go together to go to interview and take a test.
Mhm.
Tell about that.
So, as many of you know, as part of the immigration process, one of the final steps that you take is the citizenship test. The truth of the matter is, I was actually quite disappointed with the citizenship test. And the reason for that is, before you get into the test, you have to prepare, and there are about 120 questions that you could be asked. And so I was ready,
All
I have
120
been,
plus 50 more.
learning, all about American history. And it wasn't just for the test. I mean, I'd lived here, before I became a citizen, I'd been here for 17 years. So I had lived in America for a long time, most of my adult life, because I came here at 19.
Mhm.
So I understood America. And unlike, I would say, the normal immigrant who comes here because they seek economic opportunity, and their focus is, hey, I'm going to get a job. I came here with a little more than that. Yes, this country was going to give me opportunity, but I wanted to actually be American. I wanted to be part of America. And that meant that I had to understand America, understand the founding ideals, understand what made, this country the shining city on the hill, understand the systems that created everything. So I had learned all this over the many years that I've been here. And then here I am in this interview, and I find out for the first time that they're only going to ask me 10 questions out of the 100 and
And you're
20
disappointed
questions.
at this. Yeah.
Seriously, they were going to ask me only 10 questions. And guess what? I needed to get 6 of them correct. And that was it. I was like, really? That's it? And funny thing, if you got the first 6 correct, they would stop. They would not
You're
ask
like,
you
what
anymore.
a letdown.
Exactly.
You're like, out of all the tests I've taken in my life, this should be the hardest and most important one.
I know.
So you're studied up for it. You go in
And so
there.
I get there and I'm ready. And I'm like, you got the first 6 right. We're done. I'm like,
And who interviewed you?
that's that. Really cool story. So I get into that interview room, and the person sitting next to me is a black person. So I'm looking at him, and he sees my name, and our names are pretty unique in Ghana. So you would immediately know if someone is from Ghana based on their name. I would say probably 90% of the time you would know.
Right.
And he sees my name, and he recognizes that I'm Ghanaian, and he probably sees it in my paperwork as well. And I hear his name, and I recognize he's Ghanaian. And so before the interview began,
You guys are like,
we are talking about high school and
he
where
came here
he
at
grew up.
16, didn't he?
But he came here at 16, and he had become an American citizen. And so for me, after 18 years of waiting to become an American, here I am being interviewed by someone who had a similar path to American citizenship. And I thought, wow, isn't that amazing? It's like the system had worked out in such a way that, the person ushering me into American citizenship used to be from my homeland. And that was special. I thought that was like a culmination that made it really, really special to me that, the person who signed off was a Ghanaian.
Small world.
I know.
Right. It's a small world after all in that moment.
Yep.
When you go to like be sweared in, what
the citizenship, oath of citizenship.
The oath of citizenship. That part made me cry. Because you're looking at the flags instead of the room. Tell about that.
So we go into this room, and this is during COVID. And so my citizenship was even delayed a year because of COVID lockdowns and so on. And it was kind of interesting because normally it would take longer. But anyway, I finally had the opportunity. And normally we would have our kids there because my kids are American citizens. And you would have family members or friends who support you. But in this case, because of COVID, we could only go in small groups, and we could not have any guests with us.
Yeah.
So it was just my wife and I who left home that morning. And before that, I had gotten my very first American flag. And people would say, hey, you've been here for 18 years. Why didn't you have an American flag? And this is how I felt about it. I felt that even though I had been here, that America was not mine yet, right? For some reason, that's how I felt. I felt like I am American in my mindset, but until America recognized that I was a citizen, that I didn't have a right to take on that person, that I didn't have it just yet. And I remember many times when, I would go to my kids' events and they would play the national anthem. And I was like, I can't put my hand on my heart. Not because I have anything against America, actually quite the opposite. But I'm like,
So
I
much
haven't
respect and reverence. Yeah.
I haven't earned that yet. And so I was waiting for that day when I could finally, now I know the American national anthem. A lot of people don't know the second verse or the third verse. Like I have that memorized, right? I have the second and third verse memorized. So I was waiting for that day when I could put my hand on my heart, just like anybody else, and know that I am American. Like I am American. And I could say that. So I remember going to Lowe's and getting my first American flag. I was so excited. I did an unboxing video. It was just amazing. And then I went with my wife. I wore the best suit I could find. Went with my wife to the ceremony. And as we get in and we have to surrender our green cards, at that point, you surrender your green card and you get in and we sit down and you're seeing all these people. There were, I think, 31 in total of us in this room. And I look at my wife and I'm like, wow, 18 years to get to this point.
An adult.
18
years. Your journey
to get to this point
had reached adult age.
I know, right? It's exactly. And here I am sitting there just contemplating, and they give you a packet, and in that packet is a little American flag. And I picked that, and we said the oath, and I looked at my wife, I'm like, it is done. We are Americans. Today we can we can claim America as our own, right? It is no longer, I didn't come here just for economic opportunity,
Yeah.
because like I said, I was privileged in Ghana, and if I probably had stayed, maybe I could have made something of my life. But for some reason, this country called me to do something different.
Yeah.
And I answered that call. And that's why I feel today that I have a responsibility to be a voice for American patriotism. And sometimes it might feel like, hey, what about the country that raised you and all that? And I am incredibly indebted
Yeah,
to the country that raised me, that gave me the foundation, the education, and the desire to seek something more.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm incredibly grateful to my parents who said, we're not going to suppress your desires,
Yeah.
and say, just shut it off, stay here with us, help us build a family business, right? They said, go soar, go out there, fulfill your dream. And I feel like this is something we can rekindle in the hearts of our next generation. And the worst thing that we can do as Americans is to let the next generation of Americans forget their American privilege.
This brings me to as I was planning this out and writing notes and going over your book, what would you say to people, and this isn't a defense of me that I'm looking for, what would you say to people that say, I am tokenizing you because you're black, because you're an immigrant? You said something that made me lead to that question. You said that you felt this maybe obligation to defend American patriotism. And there's so much with identity politics right now, and that has really taken over. It seems like it picked up once we elected the very first black guy to be the president. All of a sudden, we were told that we were more racist than ever. But what would you say to that? What would you say to that you are in this unique place because of your skin color, because of your story and your journey, to say things that resonate more with people than if I were to say it? And what would you say to people that say you're being tokenized because of that? And do you feel that at times? Like, I would see how you could feel that way. Yeah.
I am very contrarian in the way I think about race and identity. And I don't subscribe to the prevailing notions out there. And because of that, some people might call me certain names and things like that. None of that bothers me. If someone is watching this and says, hey, look at him being a token, I want you to know this. I want to be a token for American patriotism. I want to be a standard bearer for what it means to recognize a privilege that many of us did not earn, that puts us in a position to fulfill our divine potential. There are millions of people around the world who are stymied because they don't have the opportunity, they don't have the freedom, they don't have the resources to live up to what God intended for them. Many people are oppressed. I want to be a symbol, a token for them, even if they can't make it here, that they would know that there is the ability to live freely, to make do with the resources you have. And I want to be a vessel to free people from the mental slavery. I want people to be able to dream free. There was a mentor of mine who always told me, dreaming is free. So why limit your dreams? Why limit your dreams? So I want to be a vessel for that. And so if you see me as a token for anything, I would say that token is true American patriotism. The patriotism that says it doesn't matter your skin color, it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter, your past or your ancestors and their past. What matters is putting your shoulders to the wheel What matters is recognizing that you were put on this earth for a purpose and living up to that purpose. That is the token that I want to be. I want to be a token for goodness, a token for godliness, a token for ambition, a token for an understanding and an embrace of the opportunities that lie in front of me. I am okay with that. If that is what people have to do, have to say to themselves to make themselves feel better, you can do that at my expense. At the end of the day, my goal is to inspire others to know that you need to cherish this beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It is important to cherish it. And, calling me names makes no difference to me.
I am very thankful that this land is my land and this land is your land. And when you were talking about your immigration process, and I'm sure you've seen it, where Reagan, I want to say it's maybe one of his farewell addresses or something, where he says he receives a letter from a man and he says, you can move to France, be there for a long time. You will not be a Frenchman. You can move to, and he named several other countries, and you can live there for a long time. This is the only country where you can live here, move here, live here, and you can become an American.
Exactly.
And I am so thankful for that. This journey is only 2 days from now will be 2 months old for me, of starting to talk about what I believe publicly in this regard, and some of what I did accidentally went viral, and or intentionally in many ways. I wanted to use the megaphone of social media, right, to get the loudest voice, but it all started for me on September 10th, where I watched a man that I admired and respect get shot in the neck. And I have probably watched hundreds and hundreds of hours of him at this point in my life. And a friend sends me a video that day, and I start watching, and it's just another one of his videos where he's talking. I think he's getting ready to, do what he does, Charlie Kirk. And instead, all of a sudden, I see what I saw. And me and my wife were getting ready to go on a date. And we talk about America all the time. Talk about our beliefs, talk about our love for our country, talk about our love for people. And I became so angry when I saw that. And I mean, hatefully angry, and wanted to pick up my rifle and go. You know what I mean? Like, that's how angry I was that things had gotten to this point. And I felt like very clearly, I felt that God was saying to me, love is the answer in this. So I started doing what I was doing. And I want unity in America. And I think people get this misunderstood because my social media, some of the things that went viral about unity. But I don't want unity with people that want to destroy our country or that want to tear apart our Constitution. I will still love those people, though. But I will also stand up against what's happening.
I will not eat the dog poop.
Yeah, that's the perfect way of saying it. Mm-hmm. I will not eat the dog poop. And I am so blessed, and I mean this, that I get to sit here with you. And I've only been doing this for 2 months now, not even 2 months. And you've become a hero of mine. just watching some of your videos. And it wasn't because of your skin color. It wasn't because of the fact that you were an immigrant. It was the way that you lovingly just laid out these points, and you did it so clearly, so precisely, with such eloquence and clear education, you know what I mean? Self-education, whatever, of your understanding of civil government, your understanding of America, your understanding of other types of government and economic systems. And I was just like, man, like that guy, like, wow, he understands it, So we're going to go somewhere now here in just a little bit, and do something together, which I think a lot of people that are watching this are patriots, and they're going to really appreciate it. But before we kind of leave this environment, there's one question I definitely want to make sure I ask you. If you could say something to someone between the ages of 15 and 22 that has grown up here in America, they've grown up with the American privilege that you had to fight so hard to get. And if you had a moment where and they were really listening to you, they wanted to hear what you had to say, and they're spending most of their time on TikTok, they're spending most of their time, maybe in a university, maybe being indoctrinated into some of these poop eating concepts that we're talking about. What would you say to them?
My message to the youth in America today is that the worst thing that you can allow to happen to you is for someone to deny you a knowledge of your privilege. A lot of people are telling you the American dream is dead. A lot of people are telling you that our systems have failed. They've coined new terms, late stage capitalism. They are luring you into a world that sounds good, but has always, always led people away to destruction. You have a birthright that endows you not only with God-given values, but a government and a constitution that recognizes those God-given rights. And the worst thing you can do is to give up those rights by listening to charlatans who want to herd you as sheep, who want to take away your autonomy, who want to manage you as a widget rather than as
An individual.
a person who is created in the image of God.
Yeah.
And this is the time of your life where you have to recognize whose child you are, right? Mm. You have been endowed with opportunity and privilege and a place that has built the infrastructure on the backs of patriots who are willing to put their lives down to create a place where you can fight for a more perfect union. This is your opportunity to embrace that privilege. And yes, it doesn't mean that every system is going to be perfect. Yes, there are people, whether on the right or the left, who will disappoint you, but your faith should never be in the people. Your faith should be in the principles, not because of the people who gave you those principles, but because those principles are eternal. And if you can anchor your psyche, if you can anchor your soul to these eternal principles of freedom, of faith, if you can anchor your soul to the principles that you are a child of God who has been called to a purpose, there's nothing that you cannot accomplish on this land. All the ingredients are here. And I want to be a facilitator. That is my goal, is to help people recognize what they don't see. And the way we do that is I'm going to put my arm around you and we're going to walk up that mountain. Because yes, you see an insurmountable mountain in front of you. And you have the charlatans who are telling you that the only way you can overcome is to give them your agency. I am here to tell you that the only way you overcome is to put one foot in front of the other and find the people who are trekking together on that mountain and find yourself there with them. That is my message to you. The worst thing you can do is relegate yourself to a life of mediocrity when such abundance of opportunity surrounds you. Don't waste it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. We'll take a short break and we'll be back in a second. So we're back from our break, and we are right here at the spot where Charlie Kirk was killed, assassinated. And Alma, where were you at that day? How did you hear? And what was your first reaction when you heard?
So I was working from home actually, and the news report came on my phone, and I didn't even realize that he was in Utah. So for me, if I had known he was in Utah, I would probably have attended the event, because this is about 30 minutes from my house. So once I heard the news, I immediately turned on the TV to try to understand what was going on. At the time, we didn't know if he was going to make
heard
it.
That he was shot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the one thing I didn't do is go searching for the actual footage. I didn't see a need to.
Yeah.
And I didn't want the last image that I had of him to be that moment.
Smart.
Because the reason why Charlie Kirk has an impact on me is not only the fact that I listened to him and heard a lot of his debates, but I also was invited by Turning Point USA to be a special guest at his final event, which was at the Student Action Summit in Florida, in Tampa, Florida. So I had just basically spent a few days over there with him, with all the people he had on stage and so on. And so having that kind of proximity to him, and then hearing about this, it became a little bit personal for me.
Yeah.
And I remember going down to my wife was working in the basement, and I told her, like, this is what is happening, and she was just shocked. And when we heard that he had passed, I came down and I was in tears. Like, I was just...
Yeah.
And it's just weird. I would say that normally I have a pretty, stiff constitution, in the sense that I'm not really a teary person.
Yeah.
I don't, lose it emotionally. But this was just such a senseless assault, not only on him, but an assault on a core value of Americanism that it just broke me down. I'm like, is this where we have gotten to?
Yeah.
Like, have we gotten to this spot where we can't have conversation, especially when this is a person who had dedicated his career to having civil conversation?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, even till this day, it still amazes me that this happened. But I think, like, the most important lesson from this is that there are real threats to our fundamental rights.
Yeah.
There are real threats. And as patriots, part of our call is not only to preach our beliefs, but also to defend our values. And the way we do that is not to cower in the face of intimidation, right? We have to continue to be the voices, because they can't silence all voices. We all have to find the backbone, find the spine, find the courage to be able to stand up for what we believe, and do it with love.
Yes.
Do it with no malice towards anyone. Do it with compassion.
But
we have to speak the truth, and we have to speak boldly.
Yeah, I think I shared earlier that a friend had sent me the clip. I knew he was dead immediately. I knew that there was no way he could have survived that. And for me, it was, I'd watched, like I said earlier, hundreds and hundreds of hours probably of him speaking. And, it's surreal in many ways standing here with you, because this journey began when I saw a video clip of what happened right there. And less than 2 months later, I'm standing in that same place with a new friend, with a beautiful story about what it means to be an American and the privileges that we have. And we look at the First Amendment, we look at the freedom of speech, and when that goes under attack, all of us, every single one of us, no matter our differences of opinions, should be against that. And I think one of the things that's been really hard for me, was seeing people celebrate it. And, that should be something we should all be able to be united around. And instead, it's been the demonization of who he is, and saying now that he is a racist, saying now that he's all these things that I believe that he couldn't have been further from a lot of the things that he's being, that are being said about him now. So it's crazy to stand here. It's very sombering. It's very, or sobering, I should say, to know that something like that happened exactly where you and I are standing now, but that, like you were saying, it shouldn't silence us. And the fact that me and you were able to stand here, we're able to walk onto a public university. We didn't clear this with anyone. We just came here, and me and you are standing here, and we are continuing what he was doing in the sense of being able to use our First Amendment rights. We're doing it on social media. We're doing it in this podcast. We're doing it in these spaces because we hold those values true and self-evident, that those rights are ours and they're given to us by God. And that should have been a moment where we should have all been able to unify around it. And it's sad that we can't do that. What do you think, and I've asked a lot of people this question over the last 2 months, what do you think our nation needs to unify right now? What do you think, and it might be even a bad thing. It might not be a good thing, you know what I mean? Like, we looked at what happened with 9/11 and how people became unified in that moment over something that was very tragic. But what do we need right now to unify?
I think one thing that we could possibly unite against is to distance ourselves from politics and recognize one another's humanity first. So humanity comes first before anything else. And the way that I articulate this is, imagine being in a grocery store and seeing, someone who is struggling to get to the top shelf to grab something. Would you help them?
Yeah.
As a human who is in a position to help, I'm sure you would. I'm sure 99.9% of the people in this country would help that person. But then guess what happens? After you help that person, you get in your car, you get on social media, and you don't know if you're talking to the same person.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly you're a different person. Suddenly this person is a racist. Suddenly this person is a, whatever name you want to call. And you don't recognize that if I had seen this person in real life in front of me, I would have recognized their humanity.
Yeah.
Rather than their politics. So the unfortunate thing that has happened with the internet and social media is that social media has created unfortunately, a chamber where people, we have a shield against humanity.
Right.
And we become basically widgets that can be used, that can be pointed, that can be manipulated to the ends of the puppet masters who want to keep us divided. And so I love the phrase touch grass, because in the process of going out and touching grass, you realize that the person standing in front of you is just as human as you are. And that is the thing that Charlie was trying to say. He said, when people stop talking, immediately you begin to imagine the other person no longer as a human just like you.
Right. Yeah,
and
he
that's
gave
the
that
thing we need to unite about.
Unite
around. We need to unite around our common humanity.
Yeah, and it's funny because that's what I've set out to do, is try to build unity with people. But then if I say something about my political beliefs, they're saying you're causing division. And I'm like, what I'm trying to unite around is being against the dehumanization of people that have different beliefs than me. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to share our beliefs. It doesn't mean that we no longer are allowed to have an opinion on these things that are plaguing our country right now. And I think you've said that really beautiful. And that's a beautiful analogy, to be able to step into a grocery store, see that person, you're going to help them. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Or you see an older person, stumbling, or if you see a younger person, whatever the situation is, we are more than likely going to rush to another human's aid in those moments, but on social media, we're so quick to demonize, we're so quick to dehumanize each other over these differences. We've attracted a crowd now. I think they think we're very important because we have a camera. But yeah, what has been the hardest thing about carrying the beliefs that you have for you over the course of, I guess, your time being here, but maybe specifically the last 2 months?
The way I've always looked at things is I look at my life and my legacy as a missionary. And what I mean by that is I am called in whatever capacity to speak truth. And as the job of a missionary is to bear testimony of what you know to be true. Certain people are going to hear your word and be moved by it. Others, it may cause them to turn away. But it is not my job necessarily to convert people. It is the Spirit that converts.
Yeah.
And I hope that I can be a vessel that speaks truth in a way that attracts people to the Spirit of God. And the Spirit is the one that does the conversion.
Yeah.
And so I look at the world and I look at people as my potential converts to the cause.
Yeah.
So whether it's the cause of America, the cause of freedom, the cause of liberty, we need to look at the people who are currently standing on the opposite side, look at them as potential converts to the cause. And that changes how you treat them. Because you are allowing yourself to see a future where they could be by your side.
Have hope for them.
Exactly.
Yeah, and Jesus tells the parable of casting, the seed, and it falls on the 4 different types of soil. It's not our responsibility. Our job is to be Johnny Appleseed and to throw that seed, and it's up to, like you said, the Spirit to convict. But I think also from a patriotic standpoint, it's very easy to want to not talk about these things. Some days I get on social media and I'm like, all right, I got to feed the algorithm. I got to make new content. I got to do that kind of stuff. And I'm like, man, I kind of just want to make something like light and nice and not talk about all this kind of stuff. But I feel that conviction towards truth, and people can reject it. People get to do with that what they want, but it's our responsibility to speak it. And we accept the consequences that might come from that. One of my favorite quotes ever, I don't even know who it's attributed to. It talks about how old men plant trees with which they know the shade they'll never enjoy. And we're standing in his shade right now. And he wasn't even an old man. He was a young man that gave up. When old men do it, there's not a lot that they're risking at that point anymore. But he risked it all. He risked it all so that me and you could stand here where we stand, so that you could stand here, an American citizen, but formerly, and just an immigrant. And now this land is my land, this land is your land. And we're standing in the midst of great men who've sacrificed so much for our country. And I think I've cried a lot, you know what I mean? Like through the podcast, through us talking and stuff. And I think it's gratitude. It's gratitude to hear you share your story of, and the overwhelming sense that I got it for free. I was just born into it. And that gratitude, but then also the heartache of knowing that so many people are not grateful. And you shared earlier, what you would say to a younger person that's not grateful to be an American, that doesn't have that understanding. But I think, I want to end with that quote. But I want you to finish off with, if you could tell Americans, and maybe you've already said it, one thing right now, what would you want to say to them? It's not an easy.
I know, right? I would say, live up to the glory of your potential. Live up to the glory of your potential.
Yeah.
The worst thing you can do is to meet the Lord with your talent hidden in the ground. It is our calling to speak up, to go into the world, to plant seeds, to look forward with hope. And the worst you can do is not to live up to that glory and that privilege. So wake up in the morning and live up to the glory of your privilege.
Well, sir, this has been an honor, and I wish it could have gone 7 more hours, 8 more hours, but I think maybe there's more in the future. But I appreciate you, Alma, and I know everybody else that's watching does as well.